right? So OCD, ADHD, which often come together, are neurological issues. So it's important. They're not psychological issues, as people think. They're really neurological issues. They are controlled by the brain, but they're not psychological generally where, we have psychological trauma necessarily. These are almost always developmental, meaning they start in childhood, and they are specific conditions where there's imbalances between different networks in the brain. And in OCD, there are particular networks on either side of the brain that control all aspects of human behavior. And so what we see is that things like obsessiveness is something that we all have to a certain degree, and it's good to do that, right? It's good to be able to check, did I turn off the lights? It's good to make sure that you're washing your hands during a time like this. That's good, right? That's something that evolutionarily was built into us and is important. But when it becomes a problem is when we can't control it, when it becomes something that controls us. And that is because we have different inhibitory networks. So we have basically a switch that's on the left side of the brain in an area called the basal ganglia that when we have a thought or an idea or a movement or an action, it initiates it. It turns it off. The switch goes on. And then on the right side, we have a switch that should turn it back off, or should make sure that we're not having other things going on at the same time when we're trying to do one other thing. So what we see in people with OCD is that left side switch is too strong and the right side switch is too underdeveloped. It's immature. And so we trigger something and then we can't shut it off. And it's triggered by different things going on in an environment. And what's happening right now is we have this ultimate trigger, the coronavirus, which is triggering off that left side, and the right side isn't able to stop it. And so that is what's actually happening in the brain. That's the neurological condition. And the good news is that we can generally change that and maybe even permanently fix it.
Dr. Bob Melillo, Ed Tyll, talking OCD during coronavirus. They want you to be extra attentive. And when I was a kid, I grew up with a pretty good regimen. There was a regimen. You go to school, come home, go out and play, come back in, put your clothes away, get out your books, put your books away, have dinner. If there's a test tomorrow, studying after. There was just a lot of rules for us. So we grew up working rules. When the rules become a burden and you can't function, that's when it's a disorder. Is that the boundary line?
Kind of, meaning that again, with all of this, it's degrees of it. Being a little bit overly neat is an obsessive compulsive disorder. Being very cleanly or clean in your environment isn't necessarily OCD. Most kids and most children, they like structure. Structure actually makes them feel safe. Rules make them feel safe. They know that other people are in charge. One of the biggest problems we see today is that adults are not in charge of their house. The kids are in charge of their house. And the kids know they're not supposed to be in charge of their house. And we see a lot of disruptive behavior in the home. So rules are okay. But like you said, they can also be excessive or,
right. I got it.
You have certain rules that you're imposing on yourself that I have to do this now and then. And, it becomes a difficulty. And a lot of the other issue right now is that you mentioned before, what does this feel like when somebody feels like if they don't do it, something bad's going to happen? Well, that's really the definition of anxiety, right? What anxiety is, it's really the opposite of depression. It's actually where you have this kind of foreboding feeling that there's going to be a bad event that's going to happen in the future. And it's this anticipation.
Well, I'm sure you're hearing yourself right now. That's every newscast, 24/7 for the last 21 days. Wow. I'm like, oh my God, is this our guest, Dr. Bob Melillo, or is this the news? Right. Future doom, it's coming. And, I was, maybe you'll weigh in on this. This is fascinating. I was not going to ask you this question, but I'm going to now. When a newscaster, forget anyone particular, some national celebrity newscaster there, when they get a range of death, and the range is 100 to 240 this morning from Fauci, and they ask it every time with 240 as the pivot. They don't mention the 100. They go straight to the 240, straight to the max. Aren't they making it difficult for people to digest a lot of anxious information? Might be better if it was delivered not so stridently.
Absolutely. And you're in the media, so you know that right now the media is driven by ratings, and fear drives more ratings than anything else. Fear and anger are the two things that drive more ratings than everything else, right? So what we're doing is we're focusing on how do we, create fear, and then how do we create anger by blaming somebody and saying that it's their fault or they didn't do this right. And so, I was just on a phone call with about a dozen parents from around the world that I work with. I work with their kids. I work with adults. And, during this time, I'm trying to talk to them more because I know that this is a trigger period. And the first thing I tell the parents is do not let your kids hear the news. Do not let them go on social media. Do not let them just go on YouTube without supervision. And try to be careful about what you say in them. I had a mom that just, the other day was telling me that their child all of a sudden is afraid to go outside because they're scared that if they go out the door, they're going to get coronavirus. And that, the child is really anxious and, having all these behaviors. And I said, well, where are they getting this information from? And she said, well, I'm not letting them watch the news, but I realize that I've been talking to my family in England, and I have people there that are sick, and I'm on the phone with my siblings. And so all day, every day, the child hears the mother talking about all these negative things. And so we have to be careful about how we talk on our phone and how we're expressing it because, this is a really scary time for kids, especially if you have kids that have like ADHD or OCD or autism that love routines and are used to, and if you take them out of the routine, it makes them even more anxious. So, you got to be very careful, and parents need to keep structure. I was just talking to one parent from Ireland. They were saying that they make sure that the child gets up every day as they would at school. They make their lunch for them. They put their uniform on them as if they were going to school. They make sure they go to bed every night the way they would on a school night. And that's a really smart thing to do.
I was going to say, don't you love that? Let's underscore and give them some extra spotlight. That is beautiful thinking. That addresses everything that makes kids relax. It's make-believe, but it's mom's involved, but it's kind of real make-believe, but it's fun. We put on our clothes. We don't see the teacher. There's so much you can. Wow. I am so grateful for that anecdote. What are some of the tough, not to be negative Nelly, but I do want to say, what are the toughest challenges that you might give some good tips and advice? People that are feeling a little squeezed, they're feeling a little claustrophobic, they are feeling like they should measure their vocabulary. That was a great point you just made. Give them a couple of tips. They would appreciate that so much. Go ahead.
Okay, so again, I want to talk not just in how to manage it, but how to actually directly affect the underlying problem, right? So in OCD, in anxiety, in anger, in all the things we were talking about, we're looking at an overactivity of areas in the left brain and an underdevelopment of areas of the right brain. So neurologically, what do you want to do? You want to stay away from things that might activate the left brain. Video games and social media activate the left brain networks. So we want to avoid that. We don't want to get addicted to that. A lot of people automatically, they're on their phones all day, every day now, maybe even more than they were before. They're on their computers. Screens and that type of digital information stimulates the left brain. What we want to do is activate the right brain. How do we do that? We do that through creative pursuits, through interpersonal pursuits, through doing things with nature, going out for a walk, going for a run, doing exercises, playing a game, playing a basketball, or be sitting down with your kids and playing board games, doing interpersonal things that are fun and enjoyable, doing creative things like painting or writing a positive story or creating a rap song or doing things that with their hands physically, Play-Doh, doing sculpting. All of those types of things are right brain. Going out into nature is very right brain. So we want to do things that are going to foster right brain development. Also, even things like the color blue and green stimulate right brain activity. Doing things like listening to music in the left ear, doing things to actually, neurologically. I have my book called Disconnected Kids, which is one of the best-selling books in this area. I have all of these different activities and exercises on how to stimulate the right brain or the left brain. Even different smells will stimulate right brain and the left brain differently. So, neurologically, that's what we want to do. And we want to stay away from things like, limit the news, limit, what you're listening to. Be careful, be safe, but, don't just inundate yourself where you have to listen to this negative information all the time. It's really not going to change. All you can do is take care of yourself and your family and focus on that and do the best you can and try not to get other people sick. But then, I think you should kind of forget about the rest of the world right now for a while. We're not going anywhere for the next 30 days.
I'm going to jazz it up again because I'm thinking more about it as I listen to you talk. All of these aspects that you just touched upon, right? Whether it's a bike ride or it's painting. Now, here's a marvelous opportunity. It's happening at home. It's safe with you and your spouse and the kids. Now they have super protection with you in game world, in finger painting, in cutouts and construction paper, making masks, playing costume games, games that last to the next day. Okay, it's time for us to go to bed. You were here, you were there. There's a whole life that could be so exciting. Doctor, I can't thank you enough for opening this door. This is what the media should be doing. It is not right.
Absolutely.
It is not right.
Pardon me.
Yeah, pardon me for a comment. It's just not right to put ambulances and death every moment and expect people to be able to have the things that we're talking about. They are working counter to it. But you are correct. The first big step is to turn that box off, right? You're going to have to hit the off button on the incoming. Am I right?
Right, yeah. Again, people are afraid that they're going to miss some late news that's going to change. Right. You're not going to miss anything. Believe me, if there's anything that important, you're going to hear it. Like in my town, they're calling you every, couple of hours, telling you updates on the coronavirus. You're not going to be able to get away from it. And one of the things you mentioned before, when you talked about your routine as a kid, right? You came home, you did your homework, you went out, you rode your bike. And what you didn't say was you came home and you watched and played video games for hours, right?
No.
Which is what most kids do now.
Yeah.
And so, this is a time where we can go back to old school. And we can go back to really the way it was better, where families were closer, where people weren't isolated, where we're interconnected. Again, the right brain is all about building relationships and interpersonal relationships. And right now, we're limited and we're isolated and people are really scared. So, you really stay close to your family and, really try to use that as interpersonal. And, one of the things, again, reading a good book and, doing something that's entertaining.
Beautiful. You know what you get? You got reading time. We're all reading Robinson Crusoe. Dad, you do the first paragraph. Bobby, next paragraph. Who wants to act out the illustration? Oh, my God. I can't. I'm going to ask you a quick question as we wrap it up because you've done a great job. Why'd you become a doctor? Because you love seeing people feel better, right? Why did you become a doctor?
Yeah, I wanted to help people, and I wanted to make a difference. And my family gave me a responsibility that you have a responsibility to make a difference and give back in the world, and that you have to give more than you receive. And my father used to sit around with us, and we would read poems out of his favorite book, these classic poems, and it really instilled a lot of us. And in fact, my brother and I, because we were so influenced by that, we just wrote a book.
Wow.
A book called Einstein's Desk, and we wrote this together. I've written a number of nonfiction, and he's written some fictions, but this is a book, and I don't know if you're aware, but tomorrow is World Autism Awareness Day. And what we wanted to raise awareness was that, many of these people, even people with OCD and ADHD, they're also highly intelligent. They have these superhuman skills in certain areas. And so in this book, there's an autistic kid that ends up being the hero of the book. And the doctor that ends up treating and correcting and helping this kid become a genius is a hero in the book. And the parents who have to, who are warrior parents who go out there and always help their child, they're heroes in the book. So, we wrote this book that is a really great book that involves things like Albert Einstein and Nikola Tesla, and it's kind of like a Da Vinci Code for science, and it talks about consciousness and the brain and, the universe and time and space and how it all works together, but it's in a very entertaining way. And again, this is a great book, that teenagers can read, adults can read, and that's something that people can get, through Amazon, and do that right now.
Dr. Bob, fantastic is all I can say. I look forward to more conversation with you down the road. Would you slowly let the audience know how they can find you on the web, social media, and also the title of your books? Go ahead.
Yeah, it's Dr. Robert Melillo, MELILLO.com. So drrobertmelillo.com is my website. Almost everything's on there. At Dr. Rob Melillo is my Instagram, and I'm actually doing an Instagram and a Facebook Live tonight at 6 p.m. That is actually, looking at talking about motivational things that we can do. So again, at Facebook, also drrobertmelillo.com. The main book is Disconnected Kids. It's sold 500,000 books worldwide. It's about what is happening in the brain of kids or adults with ADHD or OCD or Tourette's or autism or dyslexia or learning disabilities. And then I have 5 best-selling books. And then, like I said, we just had this current book that just came out called Einstein's Desk. And it's all available on Amazon or Barnes & Noble or any bookstores.
You're a dynamo. You're something else, man. Thank you for today. Can't wait till next time. The world needs you. We got to let you go so you can get to the rest of them. But thanks for what you brought us today. So nice to be on the phone with you.
Well, thank you for bringing positive information for the media. And I'm absolutely right. I would love to be able to do more and get this message out there. So I appreciate people like you doing that. So thank you very much. This was great.
More Ed Tyll after this.
Fantastic.